This week on BSD Now, we talk about the Radeon KMS drivers being committed to 10 current, VeriSign embracing FreeBSD for the DNS root servers, Fetch gets SSL certificate verification support, the FreeBSD Foundation's summer newsletter, a series of upcoming Linux and BSD conferences, and an interview with Peter Hessler about his OpenBSD BGP SpamD project. All that and more this week on BSD Now. Welcome to BSD Now, where we bring you the latest news and interviews from the world of BSD, along with tutorials for both advanced and beginner users. I'm your host, Alan Jude, and joined by
Chris Moore today.
Not today, every day.
Yes.
Right, so our top story this week is the Radeon KMS drivers have been committed to 10 current.
Oh man,
Yes.
about time. This is fantastic. It's probably one of the most requested things we've had every conference I
Yes.
go to. Why doesn't API
Yes, because
work?
NVIDIA has been properly supported on FreeBSD for quite a long time now.
Yeah, you know, I've almost wanted to put one of those NVIDIA logos up on our website just to be like, hey, you guys, NVIDIA works well, and then maybe that'll light a fire under the ATI and tell guys to get those drivers fixed.
But yeah, so the first revision of the Radeon drivers is now in the development tree. Apparently, it's quite good. Or the people that have tested it are not having any problems with it anymore. And
Sure.
so that's good timing because they're expecting to cut 10-stable in sometime in October, I think, right?
Correct, yeah. In preparation for the 10 release, and so we hope on rolling a couple ISOs based on 10 here in the next month or so as well.
So that's
So hopefully we can get that out to desktop users.
and
right
that
away.
will probably bring in lots and lots of error reports.
Oh, I'm sure it will. Lots of crash dumps.
Well, it's just, the PCBSD audience probably covers a lot bigger range of ATI cards than the couple of developers on the kernel mailing list.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure.
Apparently, most of the code could be merged back to 9, but because of changes in the VM subsystem, it'd be a lot of work, and the developer who did the KMS driver doesn't want to do it, but somebody else could.
I kind of doubt it'll happen. 10's so
Yeah,
close
with
right now,
they're expecting 10 release. Their goal is December 31st. So with it being that close, I don't know that it makes sense to try to backport it to 9 anyway.
Yeah, I think it better spending time on just bug fixing stuff for 10 would be great. But yeah, the only thing to note if you're going to go ahead and start testing is it does have the same issue where you lose your system console if you bring up the KMS mode.
So the Intel driver has the same problem. Of course,
Until somebody rewrites systems to play nice with KMS.
Yeah, so there's a separate project called NewCons where somebody's trying to build a whole new system console, and this kind of depends on that, but that's not here yet, so we end up with this. Yeah, that happens. There's not much to be done about it. But there's a nice wiki page that keeps track of the progress, and you can get news there. And hopefully that continues to come along, and then we'll have support, hopefully, eventually, for NVIDIA, Intel, and ATI, and everything will start being smooth from there on out.
I'm checking here. So who's the author? Is this Ed Schouten's work?
Of NewCons, or? I think so.
Okay, yeah, it looks like him on the wiki here. Well, more power to him. I hope he can get that in here in the near future.
Because the thing NewCons will provide is also Unicode support on the console. So people who use anything other than English at the system console would be very pleased by that.
Yeah, I always wondered what's the point of getting all the commands translated if you can't even display them.
Yeah, it's like, so we translated all the man pages, and then if you pull them up, it just displays this gibberish.
Yeah, not so helpful.
It's like, I guess they work on the website, kind of. Yeah. So our next story is VeriSign has started embracing BSD more, and there's a story at eWeek where they talk about some of the reasons why they did that. On top of the fact that it provides a stable platform and it's a very good base for a business because things don't get changed out from underneath you when you don't expect it, and each release is supported for at least a year, and then every second release is 2 years. That provides...
And don't ever laugh at a stable world.
Exactly.
You have no idea how useful that is.
Well, for example, VeriSign is still using FreeBSD 8.x, right? So they get this stable world even so they can upgrade to 8.4 or whatever, but it also means anything that built on any version of 8 will work on any other machine that also runs 8, which when you get to scale like I do with like 80 servers, have the fact that 9 is 9, it doesn't matter if it's 9.0, 9.1, or 9.2 RC4, everything just works.
Definitely. Yeah. That was one of the reasons why we chose BSD for PCBSD originally. Right. Was trying to do a package management system where I could roll a package that would run for more than 6 months on a variety of different targets.
Well, because even like the API is stable to the point there's actually a compatibility package, right? So if you said you guys were going to roll 10 stable release of PCBSD, and you could just cheat and install the compat 9x, and then your 9x packages will just work. You don't have to necessarily build an entire different set of packages.
Yeah, that's something I've talked to a few guys at conferences about. That's a really quick way if you just want to grab, say, the new ATI code, want to play with those drivers, you can take a PCBSD 9 box, upgrade the kernel and world to 10, install compat 9x, and just go on your merry way.
I've actually, my laptop does this. I have... it's a FreeBSD 9 system with ZFS as the root, and then I just took a snapshot of that, upgraded the kernel to 10, and installed the compat 9x, and then I used boot environments to just, it's like, oh, I want to play with vHive, and no, I want back to my 9 stable system.
That's fantastic.
It does a lot of...
Yeah, boot environments kind of changes your life when you realize what you can do as a developer with it, or just for creating sane backups.
And then, once you start talking about being able to replicate the snapshots, or just clones and try stuff and then throw it away.
The hardware is really disposable at this point. As long as your data is somewhere, you can bring it back.
So back to VeriSign. They said, BSD is quite literally at the very core of what makes the internet work. On top of the fact that, BSD was the reference implementation of TCP IP and things like that. VeriSign runs the registries for .com, .net, .gov, and a bunch of other top-level domains. So when you look up the address of a .com, that's going through a server at VeriSign. They use BSD, Linux, Solaris, and I think HPUX or something. They use 4 different operating systems so that if something goes wrong with any one of those, it's not going to affect more than a quarter of their capacity, right? So they are purposely aiming for the diversity, and so that's why they want to support multiple projects, right? And especially BSD, because BSD is their favorite, but they have to use the other things to ensure they always have that diversity. And so sponsoring BSD and making sure that it continues to thrive is in their best interest.
Very cool, and they're getting ready to even give back a little to the community this year, running VBSDCon, which is in October.
Which is going to be out. It's an unconference style, kind of like MeetBSD was last year. So there'll be some lecture type content like most of the conferences, and then also some more attendee-driven stuff like Birds of a Feather, and they're doing lightning talks again, which was really interesting. Usually they get 8 or 10 or so subject area experts, and they just kind of spread around the room. And then you group up with a couple of other attendees. I think it was about 5 people at MeetBSD. That's what it worked out to be. And then you just kind of go around in a circle and talk to each different speaker for about 10 minutes. And so you get much more interaction. You can ask them questions and stuff. And so you just get 10 minutes of really intense discussion about a certain topic with the subject area expert, and then you move on and do the next thing. It's really nice to be able to get that a little bit of everything, because you look at the schedule for EuroBSDCon, which is coming up at the end of September, and there are 43 talks, but there's always 3 at once, and there's always 2 you want to be in at the same time. And so with the lightning talk, you can get a little bit. You get that sampler, right? You get a little bit of everything, and sometimes you're looking at the subject or the title of a presentation, and it doesn't seem that interesting, but then you find out what it actually is, and it turns out it's everything's at least a little bit interesting.
And coming from the host perspective, the couple times I've done this, it's been really helpful. You'll get all these different groups of guys coming in. Everyone has different questions, right? And then when you do your big group presentation at the end, your 10-minute synopsis, sometimes somebody will come up with a really good question that you can push back to the group and say, we didn't even talk about this before, but this is some really neat point somebody came up with. Just a great way is for me as a developer to get feedback from people and ideas and some ideas of stuff that we could talk about at the next.
I know the developers of Beehive said the same thing at Meet BSD. They were, we kind of, a bunch of people wanted to talk about it, and we broke off and talked about it. And they were like, so we've developed this far, and we have some general goals of what we want to do next, but we really don't know what people are going to want to use this for and which features they want, what's more important to them. And so it's like, well, I needed to be able to do this, this, and this. Really, that's what I want it to do.
Sure.
And so, if you focus more on building this part of the infrastructure and the API, it would be better for me because, at that time I was mostly focused on replacing Zen to build something like EC2, but in Canada.
Sure.
And so, I needed a really easy programmatic way to control all the VMs for everything and do all the plumbing.
Well, and then I'm more like, how can I run this in cooperation with jails on the same box? Could I take a jail and then instantly boot it up in Beehive? So now it's virtualized, but then I don't need it virtualized anymore. Let's go back to a jail.
Yes, that was the other one that we talked about was a VFS hack. So that you could do like you do in a jail where you just like nullfs mount something. You could have a Beehive where it would actually, instead of using a disk image like a ZVol or something, you would actually pull in a subdirectory from the file system and treat that as the disk inside the virtual machine.
And on the host now, I can easily share files, manipulate data without ever actually going into the VM. I mean, just some really cool potential with this.
And it'd be crazy, all the cool stuff. So it's just a matter of getting it all done. And the nice thing about these, the unconference format was I actually met more people. Like there were fewer people there than there were at EuroBSDCon, but I actually got to talk to people more because, we weren't sitting in a classroom style setup. We were, there was a lot more hallway track.
I remember one of the first Meet BSDs we did, James from IX, he was really good about this. He went around and made everyone put away their laptops. Because, as a speaker, the last thing you want to do is go to a classroom and see 50 laptops open. Everyone's just chatting on IRC. And it's like when you get everyone to finally get out of their comfort zone, put those away, you can really have some good discussions and make some progress on some important problems.
Exactly. And so that's why VeriSign wants to promote that, right? There's, you get comfortable with something because it works well for your particular purpose, and you find a good community that you can interact with, and that's why they picked FreeBSD. And in addition to giving back some code, they're working on really high volume connections, because obviously being the root DNS servers, they have to deal with a huge number of DNS queries coming in, and even TCP queries and stuff. So they're mostly working on getting that packets per second limit higher and higher. And so they have some patches for that they've given back, but they decided that rather than just donating and giving back some code they wrote, they would actually organize a conference and get more people, make things happen.
Yeah, bottom line, if you're in the Virginia area or can get there, definitely come on out this October and join us out at VBSDCon. Should be a good time.
And it's, for people in North America, it's a lot easier to get there than Malta.
Oh, yeah, for sure. About like 6 less layovers, right?
And, 12 less hours. And for me, it's great. It's the same time zone. That'll be...
That's right.
And it's actually going to take me less time to get there than it did to Ottawa, actually.
I mean, I could even drive if I had to. I mean, that's the way to go.
Exactly. All right, so the next topic we had is Fetch, which is the little downloader tool. It's kind of like wget, but it's not meant for mirroring. It's just meant for downloading stuff. It's had SSL support for a long time, but it never actually verified that the certificate was a properly signed certificate, because FreeBSD doesn't actually distribute a certificate bundle, because the security officer doesn't want to be responsible for that. We've always... See, it's the same reason why OpenSSL doesn't distribute one in the first place. Nobody wants to be responsible for deciding what certificate authorities are valid, right? You could just decide to trust whoever Microsoft trusts, but that seems like a really bad idea, and we get you flamed on a mailing list.
Yeah. Not the way
and then, we end up with these problems like we saw, I think it was the registrar from Turkey was being pressured by the Turkish government to issue fake certificates. And so you had all these problems. So anyway, now fetch and libfetch, which is the library that lets you use it inside another app, which is what package-ng uses to download stuff, they now have support for SSL certificate verification. You just have to provide a certificate bundle, and the one from Firefox is in the ports tree under security root CA NSS, because it's actually, the package name is left over from when it was Netscape, but it's,
No, that's something we ship out of box on ours, because it's just necessary in this day and age.
So this way, when you download from an HTTPS site, you can actually verify the certificate and make sure it's not a man-in-the-middle attack, which can be important if you're using package ng and you want to make sure you can trust the packages or whatever else you happen to be doing with fetch. Currently, fetch is still missing SNI, server name indication support, which is what lets you do virtual hosting under SSL. The common wisdom has always been that you needed one IP address for every SSL site because the certificate exchange happens before HTTP can send the host header to say which site you're asking for. So OpenSSL and the SSL protocol in general added SNI, where as part of the SSL handshake, you include the host name of the machine you're trying to connect to. And that allows the server to decide which certificate to send you. So you can actually have multiple SSL sites on one IP address. But Fetch currently doesn't send that host header. There's a patch to do it, but it's from before this big patch. So, it needs some cleanup.
Has anybody stepped up to do that yet?
No.
That you know of?
I had a URL for the patch somewhere. I must have misplaced it. But it'd be nice if somebody would like to do that. They should take a look at it.
Yeah, definitely. That would benefit everyone.
Because again, that if you want to have a package-ng repo and you don't want to dedicate an IP address just to a package-ng repo. Because you want to basically for the Scale Engine CDN to support SSL for the PC BSD package-ng repo, it would be much easier if SNI was supported, because we don't have a lot of IP addresses, and needing one on each of 80 servers would really put a drain on our resources.
Yeah. It's hard to get a hold of that many, especially nowadays. People are rationing.
Especially in Europe, they get pretty nasty, and they're like, "Do you really need an SSL certificate for that?" So having server name indication as part of the fetch would allow us to do virtual hosting on the PCBSD's package-ng repo, so we could have SSL on that. I'm not sure that's really needed, but I'm sure lots of paranoid people would prefer it.
And it would be helpful.
It's another nice to have.
For those who want to know, we do sign the packages in addition, so it's not like they're coming from a completely untrusted source with no verification.
Yes, it's one of the things that actually makes the package-ng repos a little harder to mirror, is the fact that all the signing happens with that digest.txz file. And so it has to be exactly in sync with the package files, otherwise the signatures fail. And
that was what prompted us to switch over to Scale Engine initially. I mean, we had all our mirrors across the world, and you have 5 in sync with last week's packages, 3 in sync with this week's, and then 10 more that are 3 weeks old, and it was just a nightmare.
And then
trying to get it all sorted out.
The other problem obviously was sometimes it would take a mirror. You're saying your server was maxed out on the bandwidth it could upload all the time for like 3 weeks after each update, and you wanted to update every 2 weeks.
Yeah. We had a small math problem there. That wasn't going to happen.
You should see what the graph looks like on that machine. It keeps spiking to 500 megabits per second of upload.
Oh, fantastic. You have to show that.
Yes, that's just the rsync mirror.
Oh, man.
This is like a lot more mirrors than I thought when I said I would do.
And you wonder why our poor single
system with the 100 megabit connection couldn't do it.
Load. I bet you ISC, where we had that hosted, is so glad it's out there now. They're like, hey, all our bandwidth came back. What happened?
So the next story is the FreeBSD Foundation semi-annual newsletter. The FreeBSD Foundation, after last year, where we remember a lot of people saw the Slashdot story where they were talking about how FreeBSD was dying because they hadn't met their donation goal yet, and then we blew through it by like $250,000.
Well, you know, those kind of things happen. Just like BSD is dying, and then you get small companies like Netflix announce that they're switching.
Yeah, and that 30% of the internet is going to be powered by FreeBSD now.
Yeah, you know, just small figures. No, you shouldn't worry about that.
Well, in particular, the FreeBSD Foundation always got almost all of its fundraising done at the very end of the year, because that was end of year. That's when people have the money. They find out they have money left over they could donate.
Well, for tax purposes, if you're a business in the U.S., that's the time to do it.
But this year, they've decided to run a fundraiser in the spring and in the fall as well to try to even it out a little bit. Because that would make their job easier for funding projects, because they'll know how, you know, they don't have to wait until next year to know how much money they're going to have to fund the next project. And so they have started doing the semi-annual newsletter instead of an annual one, so that they can keep people more up to date. And now things are happening faster than they have in the past as well.
Yeah, we're seeing them push more and more projects now and hire more and more developers to tackle big chunks of FreeBSD that need attention.
Yeah.
So it's really good that they'll be able to spread this out over a year, and it's not like all happening in January.
Yeah. And it's also was the 20th anniversary of FreeBSD, so they took that opportunity to talk a little bit about where we should go from here, and a retrospective a little bit of how we've come along in the last 20 years. But now the foundation doesn't actually get to decide what's going to happen in the project, but you know, they provided some guidance on what they think are some of the key areas they should be focused on, and I think they've got it.
And they accept proposals too. So if there's a great idea, something that you think would be useful to a bunch of folks in the FreeBSD community, you can submit it to them, see if they're interested.
But some of the basic goals they set out was to unify the user experience, which is one of the things that FreeBSD has always been better at, because all the tools are maintained in one repo and it's all one operating system. You're not pulling a lot of tools from a bunch of different places. It meant that the tools work together better, and the syntax was usually more common. And even just the man pages has that little section at the bottom where it tells you about related tools, which has helped me numerous times.
Well, it's just really helpful to know that when I run the ZFS command, it's using the same version that's in the kernel, and things are just going to work properly.
Right.
That's the benefit of having a consistent world and kernel environment.
But mostly I think what they were talking about was even just consistency between different parts of the world. And they said specifically, ensure that knowledge gain mastering one task in FreeBSD translates into the next task. You know, so when you learn how to do something, the same concepts usually apply somewhere else, right? That was one of the things that drew me to FreeBSD, was the consistency of the file hierarchy. The fact that files have a certain place and they always go there and they never go somewhere else. So when I'm looking for the config file for something I just installed, it's always user local etc and either, you know, appname.conf or appname directory with a bunch of files in it. And it's always there, and it's always exactly how I expect it to do. And you know, when I uninstall a package, the config file gets left behind, so when I install the doer version, it's still there. But there's the unmodified original distributed version that's updated, so I can do my diff and make sure that my config gets any new parameters. And
yeah, and it's so helpful having that consistently release from release. You know, it's not something I have to, you know, coming from somebody working on a desktop, if I had to redo that every time we rolled a release, or oh no, they changed this command or this conf file, I mean, that's just too much time wasted chasing my tail.
Yeah, I remember the one that caused a lot of trouble was a friend of mine had a Debian server, and he was using a control panel called DirectAdmin, which is the one I use because it actually works on FreeBSD. It's like a web hosting, shared web hosting control panel. And Debian decided one day on the, I don't know what their middle between development and release tree is. I don't know. They have weird names. Anyway, they decided to change one of the flags of CHPass so that it did something different than it did before. And
I can't imagine that would cause.
And so it broke this control panel program, and it just made a mess. And I was just like, they just did that in the middle with like not across the major release, just as a routine update to the command.
I'm glad that FreeBSD doesn't do it as much. I mean, we have shell scripts. I mean, I mentioned earlier before we started the show that we built a lot of our framework off of the old Frisbee scripts. And believe it or not, those are what, 8-10 years old now, and a lot of those still work. Like I can still use major portions of that, and they're just just consistent even on 9 and 10.
Well, and if you read some of the man pages for some of the older commands from the like original Unix stuff, they're like, here's this flag minus capital U. It doesn't do anything, but it's here so a script left over from then still works.
Mm-hmm. And you have no idea how helpful it is.
Exactly.
I mean, maybe you guys do. If you're sysadmins and you have your little collection of scripts that you use for everything, I mean, not having to go and rewrite those every year is just so much save time.
So yeah, the other point they had for unifying the user experience is if we do pay attention to consistency, not only will FreeBSD be easier to use, but it'll be easier to learn. And I think that's one of the big things for me compared to Linux is that when I learn something, it doesn't become useless later. That knowledge is useful forever now.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not that things won't change over time or be improved, but we just want to keep the user experience the same, or at least similar, so there's not a huge learning curve every time somebody drops a new tool in the repo.
And the other thing they said was focusing on design for both human use and programmatic use. You know, a lot of people are starting to use FreeBSD as embedded devices and stuff, and so tools to make that easier are great. And, you know, I'm sure for you, tools that automate stuff so that you can do it from a graphical interface are also very helpful. Oh, yeah. But at the same time, we also need them to be usable by humans, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just about every GUI we have, there's some kind of shell or backend behind it that's just running standard FreeBSD commands, which makes it really easy as well if you want to go learn how these things work. You can just fire up a script.
You know, programmatic ways to edit rc.conf, like Devon-Teskey sysrc, are very helpful because in the past, 200 FreeBSD machines was considered a very large deployment of FreeBSD machines. Now, with high-density servers, blade servers, virtualization in the cloud, you can have 200 servers in one rack by the time you count virtualization and everything.
Oh, yeah. You fire up your 10,000 jails, and it's like, oh, man, I got to administrate all these now.
Yeah, a simple way to administer all those would be very helpful. Also, the tools we provide for status reporting, configuration, and control don't always scale to that same level, right? They're mostly meant for, you know, one developer on his laptop, not for a sysadmin trying to deal with 200 of these machines, right? Like those, you know, when I had 3 machines, getting those nightly emails with the list of any file that suddenly gained set UID was useful. With 80 machines, it's not very useful. It's just 200 emails a day I don't need.
Yeah, you see more daemons and stuff appearing that's helping us manage that now as well. Because they said there's just too much spam that I got to delete and I'm going to mess something important.
And so the FreeBSD of tomorrow needs to give programmability and human interaction equal weight in its requirements when it's adding new features and building things.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. And another one that kind of fits with what we're doing right now is embracing new ways to document FreeBSD. You know, in the handbook, they're moving towards having these little getting started sections. The handbook can be kind of a dry read sometimes. And so starting each chapter with just the basics of how to get something off the ground and then digging in how to, you know, set the advanced options, you know.
Yeah, advanced usage or what's happening behind the scenes. A lot of times I just want to know the 3 commands I need to type to make
exactly. Like when I was building the handbook article I'm working on for ZFS, I made the mistake of starting it with a giant table of definitions of what all the words in ZFS mean. It's like, let's put that at the bottom. And first, be like, here's how you create your pool with 2 disks. And then we'll get into, here's how all the different types of pools you could create and how many disks you should use. And then, you know, that way, when you just Google for, how do I create my Z pool, the answer is right there at the top. And then you can dig in if you need to. And it makes the documentation that much more useful.
Yeah, because the number of people doing those advanced things can be much smaller. A lot of guys are just like, I just want to turn on compression. How do I do that?
Instead of having to wade through a list of, here's all the possible options with compression buried in the middle somewhere. And, you know, remember to add caveats like LZ4 compression, only 9.2 or 8.4 or higher.
Sure.
But they also mentioned linking to some external how-tos and other documentation, although there's some risk in that eventually isn't there anymore. Especially people with blogs tend to every once in a while throw the blog away and make a new one.
Yeah, if we could capture that a little better.
Yeah, so trying to bring some, to get the people that write those how-tos to actually, you know, want to maybe join the docs group and actually just have them be put into as articles in not the handbook, but in the FreeBSD documentation tree. You know, as
I'd like to see them in the wiki. Maybe that would be a good place we could snapshot it and say,
yeah, even there as well.
This is what it was.
You know, the BSD Talk just did an interview with a bunch of people from the documentation committee, and they were talking about, you know, the FreeBSD documentation is mostly written in DocBook or ManDoc and so on. But if you have something, you can just send us plain text, and we'll take care of formatting it for you. You don't have to go and learn DocBook to help. So, you know, if you have stuff, you can just send it to the FreeBSD-doc mailing list, and
sure,
you know, that way
they'll do the messy work to get it up there for you. We just need,
and then somebody else will translate it for you and everything. It's just you know, the content is the hard part.
Sure. Yeah, we need to get Drew Levine on here.
Yes,
at some point
she's busy writing more documentation at the moment.
Of course,
because on top of being a big committer for the FreeBSD doc project, she writes all the docs for FreeNAS and PCBSD, right?
Yep, she does. So she's very busy.
And then they also said upgrading the cross-referencing and search tools that are built into FreeBSD, because currently you have to use Google to find anything at freebsd.org. And solving that problem poses a lot of difficulty, but at the same time would be very helpful.
It's well worth doing, though, being able to go to one place and get all your information.
But some good news about the spring fundraising campaign. Between April 17th and May 31st, the FreeBSD Foundation raised a total of $219,806, and that came from 12 companies and 365 individual donors. Whereas in the same period last year, they raised only $23,000 from 2 companies and 53 people.
Because you know BSD is dying.
Yes. One of the big things there, though, is the number of individual donors. To maintain its tax exempt status from the IRS, the FreeBSD Foundation needs to prove that it's of public interest, not only interest to those 12 companies that donated the bulk of the money. So having individual people donate even just $5 actually makes a big difference. And the foundation wants more of that and doesn't necessarily need as many of the big companies.
So what is that, like half a cup of Starbucks?
Exactly.
I mean, come on, guys. You can definitely help out.
Exactly. That's why, while Scale Engine donates, I also donate. And to give you an idea of what those funds are used for, funds donated to the FreeBSD Foundation have funded the following projects just recently. More Capsicum security component framework. Now Capsicum is in everything now, even like DH client. So if somebody finds an exploit for DH client and injects that into the DHCP answer that you get, it won't compromise your machine. Because, you know, DH client needs root to be able to set your IP address on the interface and so on, and to raw write to the socket. But there's other tasks where it doesn't need root, and this Capsicum lets it separate those two capabilities.
I still have crazy dreams about seeing Capsicum all throughout the desktop and system at some point. Just think of the security benefits.
Well, after seeing PJD's talk at BSDCan about the ZFS security appliance that you put between your network and your contractors to record everything, and almost every daemon that runs on there is Capsicum, so that you can't compromise the security appliance, because that would defeat the point of the security appliance.
Sure.
Transparent superpages support for FreeBSD on ARM. With devices like the Raspberry Pi and the BeagleBone and every other ARM device. All this stuff to make memory access faster is going to be a big deal. And at the same time, it's the vendors that want to build embedded versions of FreeBSD. This is especially important to them.
I think for IPv6 even, we had a project a couple years back where we worked with Bjorn and rolled an actual IPv6 only.
Yes, that was, I remember that was an interesting project. It was like, how much stuff in FreeBSD relies on IPv4? And if we just disable IPv4 and have a 6 only kernel, how much stuff breaks? And doing that years ago so that everything from then on doesn't rely on v4 was important, because that means we won't have to wait the 3 years it took for all those changes to trickle through once v4 actually needs to be turned off.
Yeah, and we know the operating system's not lying to us now and secretly using v4 in the background for things that shouldn't be. We can truly switch to IPv6.
Yeah, and the same thing's been happening with other projects. With importing Clang, how many hidden dependencies on GCC where they're actually scattered all over the place, and as they remove those, and there's other things in the future where apps might assume that your DNS resolver library is bind when you've switched to something else. But the next thing on the list is a huge thing that a lot of people want. It's a native in-kernel iSCSI stack. So currently, the FreeBSD kernel has an iSCSI initiator, so a client built in, although it needs some work. But this would be adding a native iSCSI server, so that'd be much faster than the userland one that you can have now.
Yeah, definitely a lot of usage if you're running, like, say, a big NAS box.
Yeah, and also on the client side, it means you could have diskless clients running off that NAS box. Because it's actually funny, at my house here, the hard drive in my computer is slower than accessing my ZFS array over my gigabit network.
Yeah, sure.
And so at one point I was like, that hard drive's not going to last much longer. I have an SSD for the OS, and then that hard drive has all my games and stuff on it. Might I be better off creating a ZVol and iSCSI mounting that in Windows and just having that hard drive actually not exist in my computer but be over the network?
That's almost too crazy of an idea. It may actually work.
That's and then cool. Now with network cards getting the iSCSI initiators built into them, you can boot from a disk off iSCSI. So you don't need any disk at all.
So you hear that? Your Windows box is just a file with some data on it on your FreeBSD.
Exactly. Your Windows system can be on top of ZFS.
There we go. And you can snapshot it. How about
that? Another project that was really interesting to me was the 5 new TCP congestion control algorithms. So now, instead of just using the default one, there's a pluggable system where the kernel modules, you load them up, and you can use a sysctl to switch between them on a live system. So you don't even have to reboot. This allowed me to do a bunch of tests between the 5 and decide which ones work best in different use cases. In particular, my use case was streaming or sending large video files from Germany to Toronto, or Toronto to Germany, which is across the Atlantic Ocean, which means, while both machines on both ends have at least a gigabit of capacity, the latency is over 100 milliseconds. So bandwidth delay product can really kick in and murder you there. And so I could choose between either delay-based congestion control or loss-based. So they look at whether, if the packet's all of a sudden going slower than it was before, that means the line's too busy, or is it when a packet gets dropped, that means the line's too busy. So they can kind of deal with buffer bloat that way, right? Because with buffer bloat, the packet doesn't get dropped, it just gets delayed. And so you can have it decide which factors mean that the link is too busy and adjust your TCP speed that way.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Is that something that's in?
Yes, that was been in since 9.0.
Oh,
and so I use HTCP instead of the standard new Reno, and I get much better speeds transatlantically that way. And then the next one is actually pretty interesting as well. Do you know much about it?
No, the direct map IO, I'm actually not.
This one is from Netflix, or partly inspired by Netflix. And it means instead of having to copy the data in memory to use it in its second place, you can just directly map it to where it already was. And so you can basically
save yourself the copy.
So when you're dealing with a Netflix box, which has 2 or 4 10 gigabit network cards, and you're trying to saturate all of those, not having to wait for data to get copied from one place in RAM to a second place in RAM before you can send it out over the NIC means, Yeah,
you're going to save a lot of time. You'll be able to saturate those cards.
Yeah, so eliminating every bottleneck you can so that you can actually be pumping out 40 gigabits a second.
Sure. Which, somebody like Netflix definitely
Yes, because it means they need fewer machines. And then one that people have been asking for quite some time, I'm sure PCBSD in particular has got lots of complaints about this.
Yeah, it's the UEFI boot environment support. So that was a project the foundation has funded as well, and still looking forward to seeing that implemented here on PC BSD side.
Yeah, because I know on my laptop, if I don't have UEFI enabled, Windows will not boot off a GPT formatted disk. Nope. So I have my kernel, or my BIOS, luckily lets me set a hybrid option where it says try UEFI and then fall back to legacy. So I have Windows on a GPT formatted disk that boots with EUFI, and then I have an SSD instead of a CD-ROM drive in the laptop that's GPT formatted but boots the old-fashioned BIOS way, and that's where PC BSD lives.
Sure, and this is one of those things. You're lucky your laptop
exactly.
has that
a lot don't.
There's enough out there that don't and won't going forward. That having the native support is going to be good. Have you heard anything? Does this include work on the side?
It's going to get the shim. They're going to use the same shim loader that Linux uses, which is signed by Microsoft.
Oh, okay.
That way you don't have to manually add a key to your BIOS in order for it to work.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that'll be great.
Yeah, except for if we have to get the shim changed and Microsoft decides to take their time signing it, but it's not great, but it's a start, right? So another project they founded that I heard quite a bit about at Asia BSD Con was FreeBSD ported to work on the Afika MX SmartBooks, which are these ARM-based laptops, kind of like a Chromebook, but different.
And the funny thing about ARM is, I forget, one of the last conferences I was at, we pulled out a little Raspberry Pi with BSD on it. I couldn't believe how many people came up and were like, "Oh, I had no idea BSD was capable of running on ARM." Just all sorts of folks. This was a shock to them, but no, it does this on a number of systems now.
And then another interesting one is the NAND flash file system and storage stack. So typically with an SSD, there's a chip called a flash translation layer that's making all the flash memory appear as if it is a regular spinning hard drive, right? And so that firmware is making all the decisions without consulting you. The idea with this NAND flash file system is you would talk to the flash chips directly. So it wouldn't be an SSD device. This would be, just a card full of NAND flash that doesn't have any logic in it. And this way, you have control over how it's being written and what type of algorithm you want to do for dealing with fragmentation or whatever. And it also means that instead of needing a firmware update from the manufacturer to change how it works, you would just change your NAND flash driver. So this involves a log structured file system to go on it, and the underlying drivers to actually talk directly to the flash chips. And this could give you a lot more control over the flash and how it's used, whether you want to bias towards longevity or bias towards just speed. I don't care if I burn out the NAND flash, or if you want some area of both on the same drive or something. It looks like a really interesting project.
Cool. I imagine you could plug that into ZFS, maybe tune how the copy on write works as well.
I imagine.
Is that the idea?
And give you all kinds of control, however you want to use it. If you're doing it as a ZIL or L2 ARC and everything. One of the other big things that the FreeBSD Foundation does is sponsor a number of the BSD-focused conferences, including BSD Can, which we were both at, EuroBSD Con, which we're both going to, Asia BSD Con again, BSD Day, VBSD Con, and a bunch of other ones, and also the vendor summit and developer summits that happen at some of these conferences.
Yeah, there's a lot of developers that they sponsor.
Well, that's not every developer who works for FreeBSD as a volunteer can afford to fly to Malta. But there's a developer summit there where a lot of important decisions are going to be made and a lot of important patches will happen. It was interesting to watch the Cambridge Dev Summit and the number of, the spike in commits that happened, especially really, really big commits. People are saving these to get them, have other people look at them and verify it in person and collaborate and solve the problem. And then all these really important commits happened inside that one weekend.
IRC is only so good, but I mean, if you can get these guys in a room, lock the doors, give them a couple of laptops, magic starts to happen.
It's really something to just sitting across the room and watching it is really entertaining.
It is. It's a lot of fun, and they'll make a big decision, and okay, that's settled. Let's move on.
And so the foundation helps cover the cost of getting some of the developers there, since not everyone works for a company that's going to pay them to do it, and so on. And so, yes, again, we stress that the FreeBSD Foundation needs your donation, even if it's only $5, just to express the fact that you are supporting FreeBSD.
You got to keep their 501c3 status, right?
Because unlike the Xorg Foundation, they actually do their taxes.
we try and keep the IRS happy, right?
So we've mentioned quite a few conferences, but we have a quick rundown of ones that are coming up in our little The Place to BSD segment. The lamest segment.
Wah, wah, wah.
But Ohio Linux Fest is September 13th to 15th in Ohio. It's a very BSD friendly thing. They've always had BSD stuff there. And this year, the keynote is actually given by Kirk McCusick, who's one of the founding fathers of BSD.
Oh man, I'm a little disappointed. I'm going to miss that one this year, but that sounds exciting.
Yes, I think there's at least 3 different BSD focus talks there, in addition to some other stuff. And the BSD certification will be there on the 15th. So if you want to pay, I forget how much it is. I think it's $120.
Yeah.
You have to register and pay on their website ahead of time, but you can get your BSD certification, which lasts 5 years. I have mine.
And of course, if you're not familiar with how that works, you're allowed to renew it as well if you can prove that you've stayed active in the community or worked on BSD. So they're not going to nickel and dime you.
Exactly. And they have all the study material is free on their website. So you can definitely take a look at that. And then LinuxCon is September 16th through 18th.
Yep. So Drew Levine and me will actually be out at that one. We'll be manning the FreeBSD booth, and there's a lot of talks of this one, including a number of them which might be interesting to BSD users, including some of the ZFS stuff that we're cooperating with Linux on, since Solaris took it back, or Sun, I guess, Oracle. There now.
Just evil.
Yeah. So moving forward on ZFS, where we go from there. Looking forward to that.
And then the big one will be EuroBSDCon, which is September 26th to 29th in Malta. It's a nice exotic location, but there'll be tutorials and the Dev Summit on the 26th and 27th, followed by 2 days of talks where there'll be 43-hour-long talks about various subjects, running 3 at a time concurrently for the whole 2 days.
For some reason, a lot of people wanted to go to this one.
Yes, the interesting thing was to see a lot of people who haven't come out to the conferences recently all of a sudden showing up. So,
Malta,
the number of big names is quite impressive. And the keynote will be by Theo Durat of the OpenBSD project about solving the 2038 time problem. So we don't have another Y2K problem.
Cool. Yeah, Theo's always fun to listen to. I enjoy going to his talks.
And you have one as well, right?
Yep, I'll be giving one there too on how we do network deployment, PXE booting, and installation.
Yeah, I'm doing one on denial of service mitigation with DNS and some of the cool things we've done with that. And coming up after this on the show, we have an interview with Peter Hessler. He's also giving a talk about the BGP spam project that he's working on, which is what our interview with him is about. His talk is directly after mine on the Sunday. So you've missed the early bird special pricing. That ended Sunday, I think. So if you want to go to EuroBSDCon, you better hurry up and get registered.
Yeah, and if you can get there, if you know somebody who's a developer, let them sponsor you. Really go to the Dev Summit if you can. There's a lot of good stuff that happens there.
It's my first one was in Ottawa, and it was great. And I tried very hard to get myself invited, and I did. So I'm actually going to be talking about in the ports working group, talking about how I built a CDN to distribute package NG packages for this project called PCBSD. Have you ever heard of it?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I might have to go listen in on that. Might be of some interest.
Yes, it's like, so yeah, I know it works, but how does it work?
Yeah. It's just black magic to me. I mean, I go somewhere and a package is there. That's all I know.
So yeah, now we're going to take a short break, and we have the interview we recorded with Peter Hessler last week. Joining us this week, we have Peter Hessler of the OpenBSD project and the developer of BGP SpamD. Hello, Peter.
Hello, Alan.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Yes, thanks for having me.
So could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your previous contributions to OpenBSD?
Sure. So I am originally from San Francisco, California, but I moved to Europe a little bit over 5 years ago. Actually, the anniversary was last weekend, and spent most of that time in Germany, and then now I am in Zurich, Switzerland, working for a free online classified website.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and so that's mostly what I do business-wise. And then for OpenBSD, I've been a user since 2000, and I've been a developer since 2008. Originally, I started off in ports, so working on bringing third-party software into OpenBSD, fixing whatever compiled problems that we may have, any performance issues that we may have, mostly in games. The actual port that got me the account was a port of the old Mac game Marathon, which may be familiar to some people because Halo is the sequel to this.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, it was, yeah. So, yeah, Marathon was the reason why Microsoft bought Bungie, the game developer, and said, pretty please make us a video game. And that was Halo. Yeah, so I did that, and then when I moved to Germany, I started working for Vantronics, which was an OpenBSD-based firewall and router vendor. And so I did a lot of the internal support. I did a lot of the customer support, internal support, and then started doing some actual network development for that. I was one of the first people to use the OpenBSD R domains, different routing domains, similar to the Cisco VRF framework. And I discovered a lot of interesting problems with it, and which I talked about at last year's EuroBSDCon, and had experience running possibly the world's largest OpenBSD R domains installation, which was, when I left the company, was around 50 R domains, I believe. Yeah.
So could you tell us a little bit about what R domains are and what they use for?
Yeah, so traditionally in a Unix system, you have a single routing table. And so the routing table is a network packet comes in, and if it's not for the local machine and it's going to be forwarded on for, like, on routers or firewalls, then the kernel does a lookup of where should I send this in the routing table.
Right.
This is all well and good, but it runs into some problems on some very specific types of scales. So, like, if you're an ISP and you have a lot of customer networks that all connect to you, the problem there is that everybody uses 10/8 for their internal network. Yep. Everybody uses 192.168.0. And you cannot have conflicting IP addresses on network. Right. They have to be unique. What routing domains does is that you can make multiple copies or multiple instances of a routing table, so that way a packet that arrives on, VLAN 100 will be in a completely different routing table than a packet coming in on VLAN 101. And then you can route them appropriately. In OpenBSD, this is done basically in two ways. One is at the normal packet layer, or rather the normal network stack layer, and at the routing layer, and it keeps the packets completely separate from each other. It's done. You mark it either on the interface or on the process. So, like, you can say, I want the web server to only run in routing domain 4, for example. And this way you can have separation. But then oftentimes you need to be able to move a packet in or out of a routing domain. So then you need to use PF for that. And so PF can take and steal packets, move them around, do all the standard firewalling stuff.
FreeBSD has something similar called FIBs, Forward Information Bases, which is just another word for routing table. Although the number is more limited.
It's pretty similar. I haven't looked at it in.
I don't know that anybody uses it quite to the scale of the routing domains in OpenBSD. And
oh, okay.
Like
I believe
before, I think the most you could have was 8 until recently as well.
Oh wow, I think we have a limit of 1024.
Right.
I can't remember if that was bumped or not. I think it was, but it's just a simple compile,
right.
or it's just a simple define that you just change and then recompile your kernel in a couple tools and no problem.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. So anyway, about what we actually have you on to interview about. So BGP SpamD, could you tell us a little bit about what it is?
Sure. So to give a little bit of background information, so SpamD is a tool that implements gray listing.
Mm-hmm.
And gray listing is a way to tell is basically a way to try and force email servers to play nice.
Right. Generally what it is when an email comes in, you say temporary failure, try again in a few minutes, and spammers don't bother retrying.
Exactly. This causes some problems though, because you have one group of email servers who just never retry again. You also have another problem with companies like Google, who have thousands upon thousands of outgoing email servers, and it's always tried from a different IP address. So like I've looked at my logs and I've seen Google try, every 5 to 10 minutes, on a reasonable time basis, try to deliver an email to me for 8 hours because they kept trying from a different IP address.
And so they never got on the gray list.
Well, they would enter the gray list, but they would never be whitelisted, because in order to be whitelisted, you have to send it twice. The other thing that SpamD does is so you have the gray lists, and then SpamD also has support for a blacklist, which is somebody has been naughty. And naughty is kind of an ambiguous
subjective
term. It's just, exactly. It's very subjective. In BGP SpamD, we have a very specific meaning for what's naughty and what gets added to the blacklist. But that's not important for now.
Right.
But so you have a blacklist. You can download it from a website. That's very common. OpenBSD provides one on www.openbsd.org directly, and it's pre-configured in the spamd.conf. So all you have to do is just enable SpamD, and then it just updates every hour this blacklist. And so what the blacklist does is when when SpamD sees the IP address in the blacklist, it just says, "Oh, fail, I'm not going to talk to you," and just does this for until it gets removed. Normally it's 24 hours. And then SpamD also has a whitelist, which is, if you're on the whitelist, we won't graylist you at all.
Except your mail always.
We trust you. Yeah, exactly. Now, SpamD is very, very simplistic. It only looks at network traffic, and it only looks at the specific network behavior. It has nothing to do about the contents. It doesn't care at all. So for SpamD is great as the first line of defense for your email. It's not intended to be a full replacement. You still need to do
something like Spam Assassin for content filtering. But by putting SpamD in front of Spam Assassin, you're not wasting CPU time processing stuff you already know is spam because it's coming from a spam source.
Exactly. Like, I've heard stories where people have gone from having 15 very large 2U commercial anti-spam devices, which were being flooded and overloaded and just basically falling over. SpamD was put in front of this, and then they were able to shut down 8 of them because the CPU load was so low on the rest of them. Yeah. As I mentioned, SpamD deals with blacklists, and it downloads them from a website. The problem with this is that everybody downloads it at the top of the hour. So at 58 minutes, the web server is doing nothing. At 59 minutes, the web server is doing nothing. At 00, it's screaming in pain because everybody is trying to download the same list at the same time.
Yeah, and even if you had a cache like Varnish in front of it, when everybody's coming at exactly the same time, it still doesn't help.
Exactly. It's okay. Maybe the disk isn't screaming, but it's the network pipe that's screaming. Maybe it's the CPU because it still has to do all this stuff.
And depending on what your web server is, it's if you're using Apache, you can end up with all these threads trying to, you're getting to max clients.
Exactly, yeah. And then it just simply takes time because the system is overloaded, and so at 1 minute, things are starting to slow down. At 2 minutes, everything's quiet again, and then nothing happens. Yeah. But then, what happens if somebody gets added to the blacklist at 2 minutes after the hour? Well, they have 58 minutes
to spam the hell out of you.
To spam until they get added to the blacklist. So that's where, so that's the first primary method that most people use for distributing a blacklist. And that's just the method that SpamD supports. The other traditional method is to do a real-time DNS lookup, for example, against Spamhaus. Yeah. The problem here, though, is that the speed of email delivery is now dependent on an external third party that you have no control over.
Or especially when you're combining multiple of these lists, right? If you're using Spamhaus and somebody else, especially if you're doing reputation-based, you want to consider a bunch of these lists, and then only if it's on more than one of them do I want to block it. And
right, exactly.
Even with DNS, sometimes latency can be 100 milliseconds or more.
Exactly, and so you have to deal with the slowest provider there. And then, and also you have instances like when Spamhaus was DDoSed off the internet. Then what happens to your email?
It stalls.
Depending on, if you're lucky, it stalls.
Right, if you're lucky, your DNS...
If you're really unlucky, it just freaks out and just starts dropping all your emails because it can't handle anything.
Yeah, or because, like if your DNS resolver has a reasonable timeout of like 4 seconds or something, then after pausing for 4 seconds, it lets the email continue. Or sometimes it'll just hang forever. And either way, if your volume of incoming emails per second is high enough, it just starts to back up until you hit max clients again.
Exactly, and then you have the standard issues of Spamhaus likes to shake people down for money, and then how are people being added to these lists? You're not really sure. Is somebody at Spamhaus why are they choosing these addresses? There's been a variety of stories going around for a long time about people who've been added to these lists when they really shouldn't have. And in fact, myself, I was added in like 2002, 2003, like a long time ago. My email server was added because somebody else in my /24 was.
Yeah, I had that same problem in about 2002 as well. It was Spews was the blacklist.
Or maybe it was Spews. I can't remember.
They liked it. They went after sometimes like they would do a whois and just block the entire ISP if any server anywhere in the block was a source of spam, even after it stopped. It was a little...
Yeah, exactly. They were a little...
Yeah, like I understand their political motivation is to stop ISPs from accepting known spammers, but that was already kind of dealt with. They were... It caused problems.
Yeah, exactly. So you have the two basic methods of distributing the list. You have the email,
the download, or the DNS,
or the DNS lookups. Yeah. So what BGP SpamD does is it uses the power of BGP basically to distribute these as lists to your machine. So you get both the feature of it being local. So if for some reason you lose connection to my BGP server, you still have
a copy of the list.
Yeah, exactly. You still have a local copy. And all your lookups will be local, always. And then, but you also have the benefit of real time.
Right, because BGP is designed for announcing new routes, or in this case, new blocks of blacklist.
Exactly. And so when an IP address is listed, every machine in the cluster gets it currently in around 1 second.
Nice.
And I believe a routing update when it hits the primary BGP routing cloud, I guess is for lack of a better term, is I believe that takes about 20 seconds to propagate across the entire internet. So it's remarkably fast. So the way the way BGP works is that BGP is simply a distribution protocol for networks.
For lists of networks, basically.
For a list of networks, exactly. You have the network that you want to announce, and then you have the gateway of where should the traffic be sent to, and then you have an optional attribute called communities. And then for traditional routing, communities is used to say, only announce this to your customers.
Right. This is for downstream customers only, or this is for peers only.
Exactly. This is for peers only. Do not announce it in Europe. Do not announce it in North America, and whatever. It's importantly, it's all site specific. So you can have anything you want on this. Luckily, there is a very easy way to list a route of a single IP address. And in the CIDR notation, that's just a /32. And so what we do is we have the... there's basically three components of the system. There is my server that pretty much everyone connects to, both the clients and the servers. And then we have the clients, and this is pretty much anybody who wants to. You can connect, it's free to use. I do not accept any updates from any clients. Right. So there's no danger of somebody inserting inappropriate whitelists or inappropriate blacklists. Right. And there's no way for any of them to change the data that I'm sending around. And then I have the servers. And the servers are trusted people that I have a personal verbal contract with, that they'll play nice and they'll follow the basic rules. The basic rules for the blacklists are they sent an email to a spam trap email address within the last 24 hours.
So that's very conservative, honestly.
Yeah, it's very conservative. That's exactly the point. However, this happens to be exactly the same policy that my upstreams are following for their lists. Right. One of my lists is the University of Alberta, located in Canada. It's their blacklist. This is also the main blacklist that's listed for OpenBSD. Yeah. So that is their blacklist policy. I am also getting the blacklists from Peter Hessler, right, who is the author of the book of PF. He's given a lot of talks about
low-intensity botnets and
yeah, exactly.
And yeah, he runs one of those spam traps.
Exactly. And so I am actually getting his spam trap in my system, and I'm distributing it via BGP.
Right. How did he normally distribute that before? Was it a file on a website? Or?
Yeah, exactly. So both Peter and University of Alberta both distribute their blacklists over the websites, and just have a gzipped file right. that people can download, and that SpamD knows how to deal with itself. So I looked at the numbers just before we started the call, and right now there are 105,000 entries. I'm sorry. There's 100,000 entries in my blacklist.
Oh, and that's only in the last 24 hours?
Exactly.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, that's actually pretty normal.
Right.
It's really humorous. You can actually follow it. There's peaks and valleys on it. And spammers generally work U.S. business hours, I would say.
Really? Because I had always found that they worked U.S. overnight hours, because that's when the sysadmins would be sleeping, to not actively block the spam until the morning.
I've noticed there's generally a peak during U.S. hours.
Well, I guess, yeah. I guess things have changed over the years, because originally you would want to send your spam when no one was around to stop you. Now you want to send your spam so people read it before collectives like Gmail, because Gmail will pull it out of your inbox and move it to your spam folder if it later finds out that everybody's flagged that as spam. So now they want to get it when you're going to read it immediately. So it's actually a behavior that's changed over the last probably 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, but it's also funny to see that how the spam drops on weekends and on big holidays.
So spammers get all the holidays, and the sysadmins have to work 24/7.
Yeah, it's kind of humorous and
Yep.
yeah. Yeah, so you're probably thinking to yourself, well, if I can just get these files from U of A and from Peter Hanstein, like, why should I care about your service? Like, yeah, the real-time stuff sounds interesting, but I don't care that much.
Well,
Well,
the real time's kind of important, but
real-time's kind of important, but you can just change the settings and have it fetch every
at an off time or something like
at an off time or multiple times per hour or whatever you want to do. To the best of my knowledge, though, they only update the file once per hour.
Right, because it was with FreeBSD Update and Port Snap and FreeBSD, they have a setting specifically for cron where they'll sleep for a random interval between like 1 and 20 minutes so that everybody doesn't hit the server at the top of the hour when they schedule it for midnight.
Right. Yeah. But the other advantage that MyList has over the quote official ones is that I also have their whitelist.
Right.
Their whitelist is mail systems that have sent more than 10 emails in 75 days.
Mm-hmm.
And so with the University of Alberta and Peter Hanstein's list, I currently have over 105,000 entries in that list. So that's very helpful. So like most of the Google most of the Google Mail IPs are in there. Most of the other major service providers are in there.
Right.
And I wouldn't go so far as say these are fully trustworthy systems.
They're just...
But they are semi-trustworthy.
Yeah, they're like respected to some degree.
Yeah, exactly. So these are systems that are able to, at least in my opinion, that they should just skip the gray listing part and go directly to the content filtering and normal email processing that people do. This also has a major advantage of you don't have the 30-minute gray listing delay for the first email. Right,
because the one of the problems with gray listing is somebody sends you an email and you say try again later. You don't get the email until they try again later, right?
Exactly.
A lot of times, and the fact that you send an email and somebody gets it within 30 seconds isn't useful.
Yes, and I've had at various companies, I've had a lot of salespeople, management, the CEO come by and say, I'm on a conference call and they sent me an email. It's very important. I need it. Where is it?
Right.
Sir, it's in the
it's kind of floating around in the internet. It'll get here in half an hour. Like that's not helpful.
And that's not helpful, and they really don't like hearing that. And it's email's not guaranteed to be real time. It pretty much effectively
it's a best effort to be real time.
It's a best effort to be real time, exactly. And people have gotten used to it being real time, or reasonably real time. So having the whitelist of going, okay, University of Alberta has talked a lot with this site, and they're not on their blacklist. They're probably trustworthy for me as well, or Peter Hanstein trusts them, or whoever else.
Or at any point, this is only the first layer, right? They're still going to go through your content filter if you have one.
Exactly, and it's you're on the internet. You should have a content filter. Yeah, so that's essentially how BGP SpamD works, and kind of the explanation, the overview.
Right, and I guess we already kind of answered my other question about what are the pros and cons versus the DNS distribution model. Versus the website distribution model, BGP SpamD gives you the instant updates that the website can't, and also means the website isn't under this incredible load at the update cycle. And versus DNS, you have a little more control over it, but mostly it's the fact that you're not depending on this external DNS service where it might be down or under attack or something. With BGP, you're copying everything locally, so you're doing the lookup locally.
Exactly. And if my system does go down or is inaccessible for whatever reason, and my lists are completely, and the list that the copy of the list that you have are completely empty, there is effectively no difference, and there's no true loss on your email server.
Right. It just means
the emails will still be processed at your normal speeds, and
more spam
So
might get
you
through
just
temporarily, but it's not going to impact performance. Whereas
Exactly.
the DNS one is going to
and
block incoming requests for at least a couple of seconds, if not more.
Right, and depending on how that's configured, it can block forever because maybe the email server admin decided this is a must pass.
Right.
And that could
or
cause
if you've ever tried to SSH into something where DNS lookups are left turned on in the SSH daemon, and you don't have a reverse DNS, you have to wait 2 minutes for the DNS to time out. Well, if every person connecting to send you an email has to wait 2 minutes, some email servers will give up after 30 seconds.
Yeah, exactly.
Because, as the sender, they don't have time to wait around for you. And so then you end up with this thing where your email's not getting delivered because somebody else's DNS service is down. And, as we saw with, Twitter and the New York Times and a bunch of other places, DNS can be vulnerable if you're not with a good registrar either.
Yes, there's... People need to pay a lot more attention to this sort of thing, and to turn on those protections is just a one click, and it takes 3 seconds to turn it on, 3 seconds to turn it off, but you have to turn it off correctly.
So if somebody wanted to start using BGP SpamD, what do they need to do?
So currently all of my instructions are for OpenBSD only. I've not sat around and tried to figure out all the exact details and configurations for other systems, but essentially all you really need is a way to connect to BGP and to filter based on community attributes. So I have a BGP service available at rs.bgp-spamd.net, which is available on the web. There's a link on the website, and all the configuration files for OpenBSD are on there.
Right, and
everything I've done.
OpenBSD's BGPD is on FreeBSD is OpenBGPD, I think.
Okay, yeah, so that should work. In my configurations, I do not modify the routing table.
Right.
Because all the routes are completely invalid.
Right, they're made up.
Yeah, they're pointing 15, 35 hops away. They are on servers that are not routers. They are not configured to receive your route or to receive your traffic, and they just won't do that. However, it is available for you to see who added the IP address to the list. So then you can make...
So you could decide, I want to use the list from the University of Alberta, but not the list from Peter Hessler?
Exactly. Yeah. I also do that with the community attributes. So, specifically, I use the... BGP has a couple special things on it. One of them is called the AS number.
Right, Autonomous System.
Autonomous System. And it basically says, I am an entity, and...
This number represents all of my domain.
This number represents me. Exactly. So, like, for example, AT&T is a good example. They have, tens of thousands of routers all over the world connected up to, and announcing a huge amount of networks, probably 10, 20,000
prefixes.
Network prefixes, exactly. But they have, maybe after all of their acquisitions, probably 10 or 15 AS numbers. Exactly. And so they would announce the vast majority of these networks with a single AS number. I don't have an AS number. In order to get one, or rather, I don't have an officially assigned one from me. In order to get one, you have to go to
Aaron or Ripe or someone.
Aaron, Ripe, APAC, and etc.
And pay a monthly or a yearly fee. And
it's a yearly fee. It's not too bad in Europe. It's 500 euros a year, I believe.
I think it's about 500 US from Aaron. I don't recall.
Okay.
But you have to have at least so much IP space already, which is a separate cost.
That's a lot of money. Yeah. That part gets expensive. However, thankfully, they have a private AS range similar to the RFC 1918 private IP addresses. And so I'm using one of those for my AS. So it's AS 65066 is my network. And then I use two communities to declare if a IP address is on a blacklist or on the whitelist. Blacklist have the prefix of 666, and the white.
And the whitelist is 42.
The whitelists have the suffix of 42.
Sorry, your Skype broke up for a second there.
Oh, okay, yep. Sorry about that.
Just, there we go.
Okay.
There you go, you're back.
Okay, good. All right. So I'll just repeat some of that.
Right, the blacklist is assigned to the community 666, and the whitelist is 42.
Yeah, exactly.
Good use of magic numbers.
Exactly. They're magic numbers, but they generally have a clear
anybody can look at that and know which one's which.
We hope so, yes. But what I also do is, so each community is the combination of the AS and a suffix of some amount, which both are within 64K.
Right.
And so what I do is I mark all the entries that I distribute with my AS, the 65066, and then the type. But then I also include the community attribute of the sending server.
Right.
So, for example, University of Alberta uses 65043 for their AS. So you can do filters based on that as well.
Right.
And BGP has wonderful filters for that sort of thing, and filtering on community is extremely common.
Right. It's basically how people make their BGP rule sets.
Yes, exactly. You definitely don't want to be doing this by hand. Everyone just does it with communities. Occasionally you'll do it based on ASs, but if it's not your direct peer, then usually you don't care.
Mm-hmm.
And so I communicate all of this to all the clients, so you can see, oh, this is on several lists, or it's on, so you can see, exactly, you can see this entry is on multiple lists, or it's only on one list. And so currently OpenBGPD does not have any filtering capabilities to make a decision. It needs to be in multiple communities.
Right.
That's the kind of thing the regular BGP network operators really wouldn't use.
Right.
They really don't care about that sort of thing. Right. So you can see all of the community attributes. One thing that we also do is we ensure that every single entry is only host specific.
Right.
We if it's in there, it's a /32 for IPv4. Currently, there are no IPv6 addresses in it because SpamD does not support IPv6. It's a side project of mine I need to continue working on. For the longest time, there was no need because there were no IPv6 addresses actually in use.
Right, and nobody would try to use it to send email.
Exactly. Like for probably 5+ years, the only IPv6 email I got was from the NetBSD mailing lists. And
they were only using IPv6 to show off. It wasn't it was kind of more of a toy and a test. It wasn't really meant to. If you're trying to ensure that somebody will receive your email, you probably don't want to use IPv6 for it.
Right. Well, what they did is that they just had dual home mail servers with both IPv4 and IPv6.
Right. And so if you had an MX record that published a v6 address, then it would connect.
Exactly. And I did. Mm-hmm. I've had IPv6 on my server for the longest I can go back in my records is I had an entry in my CVS logs that I turned it off for one of my subdomains in 2002 because some people were having problems connecting. So I've had IPv6 on my servers for an extremely long time, and I've been kind of watching this.
Yep.
Actually, about within the last 6 months, I finally started getting my first IPv6 spam.
Oh. Well, somebody was going to be first eventually, I suppose. Eh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's going to happen.
And as it gets worse, you'll be more and more motivated to finish your project.
Exactly. Right now, I have other things to work on, like the BGP SpamD system. I have a whole bunch of other projects that I'm not spending nearly as much time as I should.
Right, well, that's actually my next two questions. Yeah. Firstly, how can other people contribute to BGP SpamD? Is there anything you need or things people could help work on?
Most of the technical parts are well taken care of. I am interested in hearing from people like possible SpamD source systems. So people that want to be a server in my network,
or people that have a blacklist you might be interested in using.
Exactly. I would want to talk to them first. Right. I want to be very, very careful about who I accept in.
Right, because everybody that's using this is trusting your judgment on who gets on this list.
Exactly. I have essentially promised all of my users that I have these specific rules, 24 hours for the blacklist, and only when you send an email to a spam trap email address. I really don't want to get into any of the politics of deciding who's a spammer or not a spammer.
Right, or which emails are you signed up for and which one did. It's mostly just people that are scraping or generating email addresses.
Exactly. I only want to focus on those people for now. Also in different regions.
Right.
So like, for example, University of Alberta, they don't receive a lot of email from Poland, for example, or Germany. And vice versa. So like Peter Hessler his sources are primarily in Norway, and there's some, but not a huge amount of emails being done with like Australia or Japan, and so entities in different countries
that would be good source material for the whitelist of places that have sent email that isn't.
Both for the whitelist and the blacklists. There's quite a few emails or quite a few IP addresses that only show up in one or the other and not in both.
Right. For example, in Japan, a lot of people, if you're writing email in Japanese, you probably don't send all that much email to Norway.
Right. Exactly. And the spammers would be targeting the IP addresses in Japan or in Norway or pick your favorite country. So entities in different locations, I do like. It would be wonderful if they could contact me if you're interested. I do ask that you have a minimum of at least 5,000 entries in your blacklist.
Otherwise, it's not worth the effort for pulling all these lists.
Exactly. Like I will investigate what you guys are doing, and because I want to be, exactly as we said, very, very careful.
And you only have so much time, and you can't be managing a bunch of lists that have 100 IPs on them.
Exactly.
And because if it only has that many IPs, it's also likely to just disappear one day.
Right. Well, that's thankfully not a big deal. If it disconnects, then I only notice when I log in and when I check it. I don't have any monitoring on this right now, but that's fine. So that's probably the primary way people can help. Also, if people want to use the list, this is completely open source. All the software I'm using for this is available on the website. All of the software I am writing, if it's a patch for something, I attempt to get it into OpenBSD. If it's not accepted in OpenBSD, I work with the other developers, so it can be added to OpenBSD. If somebody wants to figure out how to make this work on FreeBSD or Linux or on your big Cisco's or whatever, that would also be very interesting.
I was going to say, if somebody had a tutorial on how to do it on FreeBSD, you'd be interested in having a link to that or something.
Exactly. I can provide a link. One of my preferred methods is actually get permission and then host it locally so people can see. So
the tutorial's right there.
It's local on my website. Exactly. And I don't have to worry about losing a blog link because somebody decided to change their layout. That actually brings me to another important point is the blacklist. How do you deal with this? So the naive solution would just be to block it in your firewall. This has a couple problems, though. The number one problem will become very clear as I tell a small story. You block an IP address. It was some marketing guy working for a company who bought a shady list of email addresses, and he sends an email, and it gets blocked. It gets sent to a spam trap address and gets added to the block list. The marketing guy doesn't see it because he just sends out the email with his email delivery service. And then later that afternoon, the CEO of the same company is in a very important business call with your CEO for the company that you work for. And they're negotiating, a multi-million-dollar deal. They are looking to, do something very big. And the CEO, and so they send your CEO an email, and your CEO comes in and says, "Hey, where is this email? I need it. Like, we're having a conference call. I need the email." "Oh yeah, it's been blacklisted." "What? What do you mean it's been blacklisted? What's wrong with you?" And then the email's
Right.
gone, depending on how you set up your blacklist. And then the other CEO goes to his guy and goes, "Well, where's the email? Why can't you receive it?" And the other email admin looks at his logs. "Oh, well, there's no response from their
their email server's down, it looks like.
Their email server's down. Exactly. He tries to connect by hand, because we all know SMTP by heart, so we can actually type it out. It's just they're telling it. And he goes, "Yeah, it's down. Look, see, like I can't ping it. I can't
connect to it at all.
It's down. I don't know." And then now, the CEO of the other company decides, well, I don't really want to work with somebody who doesn't have
a reliable email server.
Exactly. They don't have a reliable email server. Do we really want to do business with them?
Yeah. Yeah, it's the correct way is usually to send an SMTP error message saying go away.
Exactly. And so that's what SpamD does in the default mode for blacklists, the blacklist it downloads from a website. And this does, and so what it does is that it just says, error 451, you are listed on a blacklist X. Your deliveries will be blocked for 24 hours.
Yeah. Stop spamming and then try again in 24 hours.
Exactly. But oftentimes it also tells you which list it was on.
That way you can have someone to contact, right?
Exactly. So if you care enough, you actually know what's happening.
Exactly.
And in my configurations that I have on the website, this all describes how to set it up in that method.
Right.
And how to make sure that those IP addresses are added to the blacklist. So that way, SpamD will tell them, "Hey, you're a spammer, go away. You're a spammer, go away." And this way, in a scenario of the story,
the first CEO gets a bounce message saying, "Hey, your IP's on a blacklist."
He doesn't get a bounce message. Well,
that's on their side,
yeah. He wouldn't get the bounce message. He would just get, but the email server admin would have an entry in his log
and be like, "Oh, right,
saying,
this is our fault."
Oh, okay, exactly. Like, then this allows you to investigate and find out why you were blacklisted, as opposed to just thinking, "Oh, they're down. Like, what's up with that?"
Exactly. Okay. So that's great. And I guess is there anything else interesting you're working on? You mentioned other projects that you don't have enough time for.
Yeah, I guess the biggest one that I'm working on is so the routing domains that we opened with is I'm working on supporting IPv6 for this. So right now in OpenBSD we only support IPv4.
In the routing domains, or in
the
general?
routing domains. In routing domains. In general, we have fairly wide support for IPv6. We have in nearly all of the base systems. AMD is actually the only thing I can think of off the top of my head that doesn't have v6 in it. Like SSH does, like all of the standard Apache does, all of the standard tools do.
Okay.
But yeah, so unfortunately we do not support IPv6 when providing domains. So you can only have one IPv6 routing table. This is something I've been working on off and on for an embarrassingly long time. And actually recently I was able to make some really good progress, and so now I only have one thing that fails instead of everything that fails.
That's quite an improvement.
Yes, it is. I'm very happy about that, and I just need to yank more time from somewhere, and then finish that up. That's probably the biggest next thing that I'm working on.
Cool.
Go ahead and I'll just give a brief introduction of who I am. So my name's Chris Moore. I live out in the Knoxville, Tennessee area. I'm out in the Smoky Mountains, of course, USA. I'm the founder of the PC BSD project and the lead developer over there, so I spend all day writing GUIs and backends and fixing packages and trying to push out updates for folks. But I've been doing this now for 7-8 years-ish. Before that, I worked on various Linuxes, even some SCO Unix back in the day, which was a lot of fun. But anyway, I'm really glad that we moved on. We're on BSD now. But that's what I do for my day job, and part of that is going to a lot of trade shows and giving talks and talking to folks at conferences. So if you can make it out to any of these Linux shows, please come on out. Oh, Fubar was asking in the chat room what's TrueOS. So that's the server version of PCBSD. So it's basically all our utilities except just the command line versions, and you can get a straight up console, and you don't need X and KD.
Yeah, so it's FreeBSD plus all of the PCBSD shell scripts and command line tools and all the fun stuff.
Example would be like our Warden utility, which will let you do jail management, or the new Life Preserver utility. We have a command line version that lets you set up ZFS replication. So if you want to replicate your server or file server or whatever, you can do that with our utils.
Cool. Yeah, so now we have a tutorial, just a smaller one this time, but we'll have a more in-depth one next week. We're just getting the plumbing sorted out so we can actually do these properly.
Alright guys, we're going to be doing a tutorial now. So today, here's the scenario. Say you're on an untrusted network, be it on a corporate or university, or maybe you're at a foreign hotel, and you want to tunnel all your traffic through SSH to your trusted server back home, right? We can't have any pesky script kiddies sniffing your traffic. But of course, when you go to try, you can't get out on port 22. You can't get out on that or any other random port you use for SSH either, because they're pretty much filtering everything except ports 80 and 443. Sometimes just running SSH on port 443 will let you get past this, but other times there's deep packet inspection in place to prevent that. And any IDS will be able to easily detect SSH on whatever port you run it on. So we're going to have to find a way to hide it in plain sight. So let's bring stunnel into the equation. stunnel is a simple tool that's going to let you encapsulate traffic of any protocol in standard SSL TLS. Your stream of packets will look exactly like a connection to your Gmail or anything else. The setup's really pretty simple. You'll need stunnel installed on both your client PC and on a remote server with SSHD already running. So let's go ahead and get it installed here, Alan. Go ahead and take it away.
So just do package install stunnel. And boom, we have stunnel. Isn't package ng great? So the next thing we need is a config file. So user local etc stunnel stunnel.conf. And we just add a very bare bones config here. We'll define our cert. Put our PID in stunnel. Can you tell I'm not used to using VI?
What do you normally
Nano?
use with your other choice?
But I don't want to get made fun of on the live streams.
Oh, I gotcha.
There we go, and then we'll add a simple thing for SSH, where we'll say we'll accept connections on our IP on port 443, and then route them out again over localhost on port 22. So when someone connects to us on port 443, we'll set up an SSL session and connect them to localhost port 22, which is your SSH. So now we need to make an SSL certificate, so we can just do a quick self-signed certificate.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't do what I wanted, but there we go. And then we will make a new certificate. So let's request a new certificate using the key we just made. Make it expire in 1,000 days. And then concatenate the certificate and the key into a single PEM encoded file so that we have SSL reads it all from one file instead of having to have two, because that's the way its configuration works. And then we'll secure the file so that no one other than root can read it, because we don't want other people to have our secret key, because then it wouldn't be a secret key.
Mm-hmm.
Make the directory. Okay, so now we can start stunnel. Sorry. We start stunnel and it works. Ignore that other stuff where it wasn't working. And if we look, we can see stunnel is running on port 443. So that's on our machine where we want to be able to SSH into. So now we need to set up the client machine. The one would be like our laptop or whatever at the hotel. So we'll flip displays. Zing. Okay, so now we're on another machine where we need to install stunnel. This time I'll do the ports way just to show you the difference. That doesn't look so good. Anyway, now it's installing everything that we need installed.
This is what we used to do.
Before we had package ng.
Mm-hmm.
Alright. Not so bad, but could have been faster. Now we have to make a config file again, so we'll do an stunnel.conf. It looks very much the same. What else we need here? Could equals this. And the big difference is we put client equals yes. And then we make another SSH thing where we accept connections on port 443 and we connect out to our first server on port 443. And then we need to copy the certificate over from the other machine. So we'll do
so that would be what you do before you get to the hotel. You can't read the other machine.
You want to do the whole setup before you get to the hotel and then just deal with getting connected.
Yeah, I found out that the hard way last year in Poland. Set up my VPN at home and forgot to open up the firewall port.
I've done something similar. I did. I was setting up a Windows box, and I enabled remote desktop on it so that I'd be able to remote admin it, and then put it in the rack where there was no way to connect a monitor to it, and realized I hadn't opened the firewall port for that.
Oh,
so
everyone's been bit by that at one point or
it's
another.
a war story on my other podcast, TechSnap, where I did the netsh commands to open the Windows firewall on those ports using a keyboard with no monitor. So I typed every command twice, hoping that if I made a typo, I'd get it right the second time. I was just like completely guessing. It was fun to use a Windows machine with no feedback at all, other than, you know, when I did Control Delete and logged in, did the hard drive light start blinking like crazy, like it's actually logging me in. So now we can start S-Tunnel on the first machine. Ah. Helps if you don't typo stuff in the config file. Ah, there. Now it's running. We can see here. So now you can see if we connect to ourself on port 443, we actually get SSH from the other machine. And so we can do SSH to localhost on port 443. I'm now on the other machine.
Take that, crummy hotel Wi-Fi.
And you can then use an SSH tunnel to set up a SOCKS proxy and point your web browser at it, and now all your traffic can go through the tunnel. And that's the gist of the tutorial.
Does this mean I can watch Netflix in Europe?
Possibly. It depends how fast your hotel internet is.
All right, lightning round. Here we go.
You can do that the first one.
I'll go ahead and start this on up here. NetBSD 6.1.1 was released. This is the first security bug fix update of the NetBSD 6.1 release branch. It fixes 4 security vulnerabilities and adds 4 new sysctls to avoid IPv6 DDoS attacks, and of course miscellaneous other updates.
Some, you know, every time you get a new sysctl is great. Having control over stuff is important.
Oh yeah, definitely. Being able to tweak your system out like that, everyone appreciates it.
Sudo Mastery, the book Michael Lucas is working on, because almost everyone uses sudo for something, but a lot of people don't actually understand all the power and control you actually have there, or the proper best practices for actually configuring it. So his book isn't out yet, but if you buy the incomplete draft now, you get the completed version when it comes out, and you also save $3. So for $7.99, you can get sudo Mastery and, you know, not do it wrong.
I'm checking his article here. Does he have a time frame on when it's supposed to be released?
I don't think he does that, but it's pretty far along already. There's only the last couple chapters that aren't finished yet, and he writes like 1,000 words a day or more, so it usually comes along pretty quickly.
I need to add that to my library.
And he already has existing books if you want to try a finished one instead. He has SSH Mastery, DNSSEC Mastery, and a bunch of others, including Absolute OpenBSD. There's an Absolute FreeBSD, but it's rather old now. Maybe he'll get around to doing another one at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And so the other interesting thing, I didn't know that sudo is actually originally from OpenBSD. I did not know that.
Those guys come up with a lot of really
cool
stuff.
Cool stuff. Yep.
Mm-hmm. All right, so next up, the documentation infrastructure enhancements. The FreeBSD Foundation has funded this project. Gabor Kovazdan, don't shoot me if I got that wrong, has completed a funded project to improve the infrastructure behind the documentation project. It will upgrade documentation from DocBook 4.2 to DocBook 4.5, and at the same time migrate to proper XML tools. DSSSL is old, dead standard, which isn't going to evolve anymore, and a new DocBook 5.0 tree has been added.
Yep. As I've been working on docs, there's been a kind of some changes happening, you know, when I'm rewriting the ZFS part of the handbook, trying to implement these changes at the same time, but quite a few changes that are making things a lot easier, using entities for things. So instead of actually writing someone's email address in the documentation, you put this entity for them, and that way if their email address changes, it gets updated, and it makes it easier to remove people and replace people with, and so on, things like that.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
And then we have FreeBSD FIBs, which is forward information bases. It's multiple routing tables. During our interview earlier in the episode, we talked with Peter Hessler, and OpenBSD has routing domains, which is this way to have multiple routing tables. FreeBSD has something similar called FIBs, but there was a recent commit that allows you to do more with them. The FreeBSD kernel can now compile, you can have multiple FIBs, but they've added a new column to the display in PS to actually show you which FIB a different process is associated with. So when you use setFib to say, this command, this process or this jail should do all of its routing through this separate routing table, you can now look up which routing table a process is using PS.
Oh,
yeah, it's like, how did we not think of that before?
Yeah. Well, still, better late than never. That's really cool. All right, next up, we got FreeNAS 9.1.0 and 9.1.1 have been released.
Yeah, when we started writing the show notes for the show, they got ahead of us and did another release already.
Right? They just push them out faster. So a lot of improvements in pretty much all areas across the board. It's a big upgrade. It's based on FreeBSD 9 stable, brings in a lot of new ZFS features that have come down the pike from FreeBSD. Yep. They've even cherry-picked a bunch of features from 10 current and brought them back into the FreeNAS 9 series. It has a new volume manager and a new easy-to-use plugin management system for adding your other applications, like, say, a transmission, etc.
Yep, and it looks like Plex is coming along to eventually be in there as well.
Yep. They're working on that as well. 9.1.1 is released shortly after to fix a couple UI bugs and plugin bugs, but it's ready and up on the website now. Give it a whirl.
And then FreeBSD has now switched to a BSD license patch, because the previous one was GNU licensed, or GPL, and so they've had BSD patch for a while, but unless you set variables in your make.conf or source.conf, it still used the GNU one. But now the default is, so when you run the patch command, it runs BSD patch, and if you want GNU patch, you have to run it manually. And
hopefully it's pretty compatible. I haven't heard too much.
And Port Manager has checked and approved that it works with all ports already, so we already know that it works. And so if you still need it, you have to add the build flag with GNU patch in order for your source tree to be built with GNU patch instead of BSD patch. Yes, cool. Continue our project of getting rid of the GPL. There's a wiki page with status on that, although it's a little out of date, as things on wikis tend to get sometimes.
It'll probably get updated right after Euro.
Yes, I imagine with all the stuff that happens at a Dev Summit. But that's it. Finally, we're at the end of the first episode.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes, so we have another episode next week. Show's live on Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, which is 1800 UTC. And then it'll be out for download usually, I'm guessing, Thursday mornings, maybe later, maybe earlier. It depends on a lot of things. The first couple might be a little slower because there's a lot more work to be done. But we should have a decent release schedule. There'll be RSS feeds and everything. You'll be able to subscribe and with your RSS reader or iTunes or whatever you like to do. But also, we'd like to hear comments from you. Do you have ideas for segments or comments or anything? You can email feedback@bsdnow.tv, and that will go to Chris and I and TJ and everybody that helps with the BSD Now podcast.
Oh, great. Thank you so much,
and thank Chris for joining me and all of you for watching, and see you next week.